up, guys? It's me. So my bookmark doesn't matter. I'm done with the book. I just finished the book of the Unnamed Midwife by Meg Ellison about 3 hours ago. I finished it pretty fast, and I just wanted to talk about some of my thoughts. This is a very low-key video, no effort. We don't have the lighting we deserve, but this is the lighting we get right now. But yeah, I just wrote down some of my thoughts. I want to go through them. I think that, there's definitely gonna be spoilers. I'm gonna try to keep it spoiler free at the beginning and then talk more about what actually happens in the book later. Also, this isn't really a review because I don't really know, whatever. It's just basic thoughts that I had after reading this book. This book is post-apocalyptic fiction. It's very bleak, and what do I have to say about it? I gave it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I really enjoyed the book, but I also realized that everything I'm going to say about this book will probably sound like a negative. It's not. For some reason, things that I usually don't enjoy in books, I really enjoyed in this one. And I thought it was a great read. But yes, okay, so the premise of this book is that there's some kind of an illness that wipes out most of humanity, but it really especially hits women and like fetuses very hard. So I think basically no child survives childbirth, and most women die as well. And then apart from that, it just like basically wipes out most of humanity. So pretty much everyone's dead. Basically, this woman wakes up in hospital, realizes that pretty much all of humanity is dead. She somehow survived. She was like a midwife at this hospital, so she has a medical training. And she just kind of, first of all, sets out to find other humans. But I think along the way, she basically encounters a lot of really horrifying things. This book is full of a lot of like graphic content. There's like murder, sexual assault, a lot of sexual assault, more sexual assault. Yeah, it's not a fun time, but I think it was a good book overall. The way that the writing style worked, it kind of bothered me at the beginning, but I got used to it really quickly. The writing switches between third-person limited point of view and I guess like diary entries that are written by this midwife as she's going through her journey to find people, figure out what happened, all of that. And it took me a long time to kind of get used to the diary entries. I'm not a big fan of those in general. Like one of my favorite series of all times is The Princess Diaries, but God, it took me a long time to get used to the writing style. But I did grow to appreciate it, I think, because the way that it was split up between diary entries and third person limited is that the diary entries would span like a long period of time. So when like nothing was happening for long periods of time, she would be writing in her diary, and then when there was some like a scene that was more action heavy or like really pivotal to the plot, that's when it would switch into her point of view. At some point she starts writing down like other people's stories in her entries as well, and that becomes an important part of her story as well. But yeah, that's how it's written. It's obviously not going to be for everyone. It took me a while to get into, like I said, but I thought that the author did a really good job of balancing the different ways the story was written. Characters. I am a very character-driven reader, but I think this book I'm like surprised I liked it because none of the characters are really likable. I think they're compelling characters, but I didn't like especially the main character. I had an appreciation for her and I admired her for like how strong she was and how far she was willing to go, and I thought that her like mission was really interesting. There was a lot of things about her that were really interesting, but especially as the story went on, I found myself disliking her more and more, but also kind of sympathizing with her because obviously she's very, very isolated. She has seen a lot of horrible things that makes her very jaded, but the characters were not like the reason that people like this book. Almost every man in this book ends up being like a rapist or a murderer, and that's frustrating. It makes a little bit of sense because of what has happened. First of all, women are so rare. And second of all, a lot of the times the men who stuck to their morals were more likely to get killed off by other groups of men, so that made sense, I guess, but it was still really frustrating to read. Yeah, I think another reason none of the characters are really likable is because you see them through this midwife's eyes, and she has just gone through so much, and she's become so jaded, and she doesn't trust people very much. And even the few times where she did have people that, especially at the beginning, she did have people that she cared about or she kind of made a bond with, she realizes how quickly they'll leave her if it's more beneficial for them, and so that really shapes her view of the people that she meets, and I think because of that she has a lot of bitterness and she's very closed off emotionally. Especially, I think later we meet this character Jody, and Jody like is a very sweet person, but I guess at that point the midwife calls herself Dusty. She's not who Dusty normally would have been friends with, and Dusty gets very, very frustrated with her very easily. Moving on. So another thing I liked about this book, in a lot of ways the book reminded me of The Handmaid's Tale, even though the premises are very different. Like in both books there's this problem with infertility, but in The Handmaid's Tale like everything becomes much more tightly controlled, and in this book almost everyone's dead, and so it's like a much more desolate, like Wild West kind of thing. One of the things that I enjoyed about this book was that because the main character was a midwife, she has medical training, and she also specifically has training surrounding women's health, and so that was something we got to learn a lot about. It kind of showed the unique struggles that women would go through if this was kind of a situation that came to pass, and because of the way that the fever or like this illness in the book really affects women, like pregnant women. She's trying to keep herself safe by disguising herself as a man, but she goes out and she tries to find other women who are wandering around, and she often provides them with things such as birth control. She provides them with just like anything she can really to make their lives a little bit easier, especially because so many of these women are dying while giving birth. But yeah, I think it was interesting to see that aspect of trying to navigate and survive in this post-apocalyptic world. Another thing that I liked about this book, basically she runs into a group of Mormons, and I thought it was really interesting to introduce this group of Mormons because they were basically like, they were farming and they had like domesticated animals from what I remember, and they had like this nice little society going on, whereas like everything she had experienced so far up until that point was kind of everyone out for themselves. It was like a lot of violence and murder, so it was like a really nice change of pace, showing kind of like another way that people would deal with the situation. But without getting too much into spoilers, a lot of the leaders were trying to manipulate situations based on like the power that they held in the church, and it was really interesting to see kind of that shift, especially as some of the previous leadership was overthrown. So the final thing that was like explored in this book that I thought was really interesting was the idea of sex and intimacy and what that means to different people. Our main character, the midwife, who I'm going to call Dusty in this situation because in for most of the book she goes by Dusty. She was married to Jack, who when she wakes up he's gone. She's not sure if he's alive. She's still in love with him clearly, but she doesn't know where he is, and she just like really seriously craves emotional and physical intimacy, and that's kind of contrasted with Jody, who comes to live with her while she's pregnant. And Jody was married to her husband Honus for about a week before he left. She's pregnant now, but she is very, very clearly in love with Honus, but she doesn't crave the same kind of intimacy. Even when he comes back, Jody is not very physically affectionate with Honus at all. She is so doting and so loving, but she doesn't care at all in that aspect. It's never made clear, but based on the conversations between Dusty and Honus, it seems that either Jody is just asexual, she's just not interested, or she just hasn't had time to figure out what she likes, but it mostly seems like Jody might be asexual. And then there's Honus, who is also clearly he very much loves his wife, but he craves intimacy as well, and this was the most frustrating part of the book, and this is like really when you start to, I disliked Dusty for a while because she's just so rude to Jody, because she sees Jody as like not as smart as her, and not as like capable of keeping up with intelligent conversation, which I guess Jody is portrayed as pretty simple, but again, you're seeing her through Dusty's eyes, and they just don't have a lot in common. Their outlooks on life are very different in terms of what's important, and so when Honus comes back, it's Dusty and him start to have, it seems like, a bit of an emotional affair, and they end up hooking up multiple times. And even within that, it was really interesting to see that Honus falls in love with Dusty, but Dusty has only been using him for sex because she's not interested in him at all. She literally just craves physical intimacy. I think it was just really interesting to see these like contrasts between these different characters and how intimacy is so or plays such a different role in each of these characters' lives. The one nice thing was that moment was never played off as like, okay. What was happening between Dusty and Honus basically causes a huge rift in their entire in like the group, even if Jodie never finds out. And it's hard because I think that's the point where I start to really, really dislike Dusty for what she's doing. But at the same time, I sympathize with her because there's almost nobody left. She's so alone. And she just really wants to not be lonely anymore. And there's the argument to be made, and I've like seen a couple reviews where they're like, he was a married man. There are not that many married men out there. Like, there are so many single men. Like, she could have just gone for one of them. Up until this point, all the men that she's met are basically rapists and murderers, and he's the first one that she's been able to open up to. So that was interesting. What else I don't know if I have anything else to say about this book. Oh, the last thing is that I love this book up until the very end. And I don't think the ending was bad, but I think that based on the description on the back, where it says, she'll discover that she has a greater role than chasing a pale imitation of independence. After all, if humanity is to be reborn, someone must be its guide. So you know throughout the book that this unnamed midwife is supposed to be responsible for like restoring humanity, and kind of solving what the problem is. And I think that it's really frustrating that I realized when I was about like 40 pages left that I had no idea how she was going to wrap this, how Ellison was going to wrap up the story. They didn't really figure out how children were, like, I don't know. I wish it had focused a little bit more on that part, or had just left it out of the synopsis on the back, you know? Like, I didn't have to expect the midwife to like fix this problem and like to learn how she's fixing this problem. It could have just been a survival story. But you know, if the synopsis says that she is humanity's last hope, then I want to know how she's fixing society and like how she is taking care of this problem. I like, that was my biggest thing, you know? I think I was just misled, but I didn't hate the book. I loved the book. It was 5 stars for me, despite having almost nothing that I usually like in a book, which is crazy, but okay. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Read it, don't read it, not my... I also really like this book cover. Look at it. It's so nice. There's 2 more books after this. I don't know if I'll be reading them because I do, like, this worked really well as a standalone story. Yeah, that's my feels on this book. And yee. Well, anyways, thanks for listening to me talk about my thoughts on books. See you all in the next... Well, I don't know why I said that, because I personally won't be seeing anyone. I'm just recording to a camera. So why do YouTubers say see you all in the next one? You are not seeing anyone. Bye.